All right, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Monroe County History Center. I am Christopher MG, Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our event today, which is the latest in our Community Conversation series. We usually do these twice a year. We're convening this important conversation because the Chamber recognizes the need for better, more inclusive dialogue on the wide range of emerging challenges that we are navigating as a community, much of which is rooted in extreme poverty, mental health, substance abuse disorders. We know the solutions to these complex challenges are not easy and require the private, nonprofit, and government sectors to work together to achieve meaningful progress. Our goal for this discussion is pretty simple. We want to open the lines of communication between our service providers and business. We want to be a catalyst for striking an appropriate balance on the need for compassion toward the most vulnerable residents while also ensuring accountability and standards of conduct that will improve our quality of life. We're hopeful that the constructive conversation today will put us on a path toward progress. I also want to encourage your questions throughout the program this morning. On your seats, you had a card. So if you have those and you have a question, just put it up. One of our fine members of the chamber staff will come by and pick that up, and we will give it to our fine moderator. Now, it wouldn't be a chamber event without recognizing our fine sponsors. Before we get started, I'd like to take just a few minutes to recognize all of the sponsors, their support for today's event. The program lists our sponsors, but we'd also like to personally express our appreciation for all that they do, for supporting us and their leadership that they bring to the chamber. So please hold your applause until the end so we can thank these businesses together with a big round of applause and a thank you. So we have the Cook Group, Building Associates, Duke Energy, Fourth Phase Technology, IU Credit Union, Ivy Tech Community College, Bloomington. And I also want to thank Chef Lee for the fine breakfast today, and of course the Monroe County History Center for hosting us. I am now pleased to welcome our moderator, no stranger to this audience, Eric Spoonmore, President and CEO of the Chamber, and our panelists today, which include some service provider leaders and business leaders in the community. We have Doug Bruce, President of Tabor Bruce Architecture, Reverend Forrest Gilmore, Executive Director of the Beacon Inc. We have Dana Jones, Director of Community Engagement and Services at the Wheeler Mission, Mary Morgan, Director of Housing Security at Heading Home of South Central Indiana. And we have Kristen White, Association Director of the Bloomington Board of Realtors. Give them a round of applause, please. Eric, you want to take it away?
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks, Christopher. Let's give our sponsors a big round of applause as well. Appreciate all their support of the Chamber's programming, and I also want to recognize a few folks here in attendance. Joining us today are a few members of the Chamber's Board of Directors. We have Dan Peterson, Vice President of Government Relations at Cook Group. In the back of the room, Don Weiler, founder of Bailey Weiler Design and Build, Mike Richardson, owner of Fast Signs, and Kirk White, Vice Provost at Indiana University. We appreciate the leadership of our Board of Directors and want to thank you all for being here this morning. Also want to recognize our elected officials who are in attendance today. I believe we have, will be joining us as City Council President Sue Scambolari, unless she's here already. We also have Bloomington Township Trustee Efrat Rosser. Thanks for joining us. Also want to give a special thank you to Carrie Thompson for being here as well to listen to this important conversation. We always appreciate our elected leaders joining these events, and it's great to see you all here, so thank you. Okay, so I think Christopher really summed up our goal here today pretty well. The Chamber of Commerce is, in my opinion, uniquely positioned in the community where we sit at the intersection of business, government, and our nonprofit sectors. And so I think the Chamber has a real role to play in bringing people together to have honest and open dialogue about the more difficult realities of our community. And so these conversations are meant to be informative and a first step toward developing solutions for issues that I know we all care very deeply about. And the challenges we're discussing today are not unique to Bloomington, by the way. Many parts of our state and our nation are dealing with a crisis of untreated substance use and behavioral health disorders, and this is so frequently rooted in the most extreme levels of poverty and life trauma. And so what we can do to distinguish our community from the others is how we respond to these challenges and recognizing that we're all in this together. It has to be a full community effort, a united front, if we're going to achieve meaningful progress in getting people the help they need so that everyone here has access to a high quality of life. I think our best outcomes will require a great deal of collaboration, education, some compromise, which can be a good thing, and a strong desire and commitment to being innovative in our approaches. Because one thing is for certain, the status quo is not working the way we'd like it to be. And as Christopher mentioned, there has to be a better balance for us. So I hope we can keep all that in mind as we have this discussion today. Again, we encourage your questions throughout the program, so please don't be shy with those. And before we kick things off, I'd like to just take a few moments here for our panelists to give an introduction of themselves and the work they're doing in our community. Doug, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Do we need this? Yes. I've got a lot of microphones up here. I'm Doug Bruce. I own Tabor Bruce Architects. I've owned it for 31 years. I grew up in this community. Many of you might have known my parents owned the Betty Jean shop on the square. So I've been involved, and I think my family has been involved in downtown Bloomington and see how vital our downtown is to our community. And my office is located at 1101 South Walnut Street, so I'm in an area where I see a little bit of everything, really. And I agree with Eric. I'm here to at least bring up issues that I see on a daily basis, but I also understand that there's just no easy solution. So I welcome your questions.
Hi, everyone. My name's Forrest Gilmore, and I'm the executive director of Beacon, Inc. We operate programs like Shalom Community Center and Friends Place, which is our overnight shelter, Crawford Homes, and other programs. We're a local nonprofit. We've been around for almost a quarter of a century in Bloomington, and really have our roots here, and our work is here, and our commitment is to Bloomington. That's our passion, is this community. Last year, just in terms of the impact, we've focused a lot on, as an organization, on housing. That's been a huge part of our mission for the last 10 years in an attempt to be more solutions-driven in the work we've done. And so just last year, we helped 870 people either avoid homelessness or move out of homelessness into a new home. So that's a number I think that we're very proud of and want to keep going.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Jones. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Services at Wheeler Mission here in Bloomington. I'm a long-term Southern Indiana resident. I've been working with those experiencing homelessness now for going on my 24th year here in Bloomington, and so it's been an interesting time and season to be working with those experiencing homelessness, the unhoused here. Working with Wheeler Mission, we have a low barrier. We are the only low barrier emergency shelter, the largest shelter in our area, in our region. We care on average on daily throughout our summer months about 70 adult men, and in our winter months, which we're coming up on what we call winter contingency, November 1st to March 31st, we will be seeing an increase in that as we see some of those experiencing homelessness on our streets move into shelters. So we do answer the question of what are you going to do tonight? So we are that emergent care facility, so when someone needs a place to go, they have a place to go. And we try to reduce the barriers for their care and so that they can come in just as they are. And then we can get them started in the processes of housing, health care, mental health care, and the things that they need to move them forward. So that's what we do in a little nutshell.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Morgan. I'm director of Heading Home of South Central Indiana. We're a relatively new initiative that was started in late 2021 as a community collaboration. It's really remarkable when you think back on the groups that came together to really create an entity that can drive long-term systemic change to strengthen housing security in our region. The city of Bloomington, Monroe County, I think Eric was on the board or on the county council when they voted to fund Heading Home. The United Way of Monroe County, which is now called the United Way of South Central Indiana, the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, Bloomington Township, the Perry Township, the South Central Housing Network. So it's really a true collaboration. We are not a crisis response initiative. We have many people in the community that are doing that already, but our charge is really to look at the long horizon. What things can we change, the way that we're doing things in our community and our region, so that over time we will decrease the number of people who fall into homelessness and strengthen the people who are maybe on the edge of that with their housing security. And I'd just like to give a shout out to some of my advisory council members, Efrat Rosser from Bloomington Township, Beverly Callender Anderson from the city of Bloomington, and Randy Rogers from United Way. Thanks.
All right, good morning. I don't even know where to start. So I am Kristen Whita, the Association Executive of the Board of Realtors. So I am a realtor. I understand how housing is affected by homelessness and the value of the properties, how hard it is to sell a house here when you're driving somebody around downtown and it's, you know, the streets are covered in people that are living in tents and there's trash everywhere. I understand how it affects the business value. But I also understand what it's like to struggle with mental illness because my background is in human services. So I actually did my internship at LaRue Carter, which is a state psych hospital, as they were deinstitutionalizing people. So my background is working with people that were deinstitutionalized when the state shut them down and transitioned them into the communities. Back then, basically, they said, this isn't going to work. We're going to end up with a huge homeless crisis, and here we are. So throw that on top of the huge drug issues we have, and it's wait till you hear from these guys because it's totally different than it ever used to be. So the other thing I have experience with is I'm a recent divorcee and an empty nester. So I was like, what am I going to do with all these rooms in my house? And I'm tired of talking about the housing shortage and the homeless crisis, and I wanted to do something a little bit more about it. Happened to meet a young woman at my church who was kind of struggling with housing. She needed to relocate, needed to start her life over. She's been in and out of shelters in the past, in and out of foster care when she was younger. So I took her in and she's been living with me. So we've been kind of walking that path, and I've been learning a ton from just doing life and spending life with her. And you'll hear from these guys about how relationship is like the number one thing to help somebody out of this type of crisis. So next person.
All right, well, very good. Thank you all so much for joining us. So let's just kind of dive right in here. In my position with the Chamber, I can tell you, and I'm sure many of you are aware, one of the biggest concerns I hear from our members is about illicit activities and behaviors that our businesses are concerned about. So I want to give our service providers an opportunity to talk about the challenges from your end of things as well, too. And could you talk a little bit, 2 or 3 minutes, about what you feel is the most challenging aspect of the current landscape around mental health and substance abuse disorders here in Bloomington, and how is that really contributing to some of the challenges that we're experiencing on the streets?
That's a massive question. So let's kick it off with big. So substance use and mental illness and homelessness are not the same thing. So it's important to understand that most people experiencing homelessness experience it for a short period of time, and then they transition out of homelessness back into a safe home. So it's important to understand that. And most people with a severe substance use disorder and most people with a severe mental illness are housed in our country. So that's something to always keep in mind as well, is that most people who have these issues and challenges have found a way to be successfully housed and to not be on the streets and homeless. So I think that's important to think about. But in terms of challenges, I think there was a huge landscape change in our community around 2016, and it actually can be documented. You can see the passage of synthetic drugs into the Midwest, and they hit Bloomington right around that time. And that's particularly a new form of meth called P2P meth, and fentanyl are the two main ones that we see. Fentanyl is highly addictive and kills people when they take too much, which is very easy to do. And meth creates all kinds of challenges, including it mimics mental illness and can create psychosis and things like that when taken in extreme amounts. So while our homeless numbers and as a community have remained steady going back to 2015, we've had the same number of people experiencing homelessness in our community going that far back. We're seeing a lot more, I would say, behavioral challenges, and they're directly, I would say, tied to meth and fentanyl, and certainly meth to a large degree. I'm going to stop there because we could go on and on, but that's a good place to pause.
Yeah, sure. And just let me tie a few things onto this. And when Wheeler came to Bloomington in 2015, we were sheltering approximately 35, 40 people, men and probably 10 ladies. We watched the opioid epidemic rise up the I-65 corridor and just smack us. And so at that time, we began to scramble. We saw entire families because of the rural poverty in our area. Bloomington is this little beacon of hope for many folks in our surrounding region, that you can come and find employment, you can come and find entertainment, you can come and find things to do. So when the opioid epidemic came our way, we had just this stabilization of these families. And so we saw entire families destabilize, family units destabilize. And due to the meth that Forrest talked about, the meth and the fentanyl and those drugs that are just causing havoc within those family units. And so we then were asked by the city, we had an issue on Kirkwood. And they were saying, what are we going to do with all these people? How many remember the crisis on Kirkwood? It was in our Herald Times, the big front pages. And so we went down and we took buses down and we started engaging people. And instead of being the police being involved, our case managers were involved. And we successfully moved that population from 30 people. Now, as Forrest said, static population homelessness, but many of them still living on the street at that point. And so we moved, we're successful in moving a lot of those folks from that position to our shelters. And so they could find resourcing, they could find programs, they could find the help they needed, and alleviate some of the things that we were experiencing on Kirkwood, which we were talking about today, the behaviors and those things, which have been exacerbated, as Forrest went in detail about, with the drug use, with the mental health conditions. I think the largest piece we have struggles with currently is the visibility of those two groups, those experiencing homelessness who are suffering with either the substance use disorder or the mental health issues. And I think that's what you, as a general public, are struggling with. But let me say this. Many of the people that we shelter on a daily night, and every night at our shelter, are not always those struggling with mental health or those struggling with substance use disorders. Many of the folks that we help who are experiencing homelessness is episodic in nature. They come And we are that stepping stone they need to have a 10 to 14-day stay to achieve housing again. And so we are effectively that emergency shelter. So this smaller population that we're seeing that is causing, actually last night we sheltered 72, so of that probably 60+% are just those in episodic, and those others are those that are going to be with us for a minute as they try to come out of the mental health piece, out of the addiction piece, and we all know that can take time. And so that's where we're at right now, is working with those folks, and many times we are burdened with trying to move those folks forward, those experiencing severe mental illness and those with drug substance use disorders, into sometimes what are broken systems, and which takes a while for us to get them moved forward. So that's where we're at right now.
I would just like to quickly add that oftentimes for the small number of people that we see on the streets, the substance use and mental illness coexist, right? So that makes it even more challenging to address. Again, just to emphasize, it's a relatively small population, and underlying all that is probably decades-long trauma that has not been addressed and is kind of being self-medicated in some ways. Do you wanna-
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think of it like if you guys have a rough day, right? And you might be like, hey, I need a glass of wine tonight, or I want a beer, or, I really need some chocolate to deal with my, stress. Whatever it is, you might have that thing that you go to for a stress. Imagine having a really bad trauma. You're going through a divorce, you were sexually abused, you've got all these really bad things that happened, and you've done with all those things, but then something else comes along that will help you even forget more. And that one thing happens, and then they're stuck. So we all have trauma in our life. We've all have stressors, and these folks have just run into a really bad trauma, and they've run into that one time where they tried something rough, and then now they're stuck. And then you've got people with chronic mental illness, like we're deinstitutionalized, that come up without any support. They can't get medication, so they're self-medicating. They're finding whatever they can to help them cope with whatever psychosis they're experiencing, extreme depression they're experiencing. They're trying to normalize their life, and this is the only way that they have to do it, because we don't have the systems and the supports in place to help them properly.
Great. So we heard the perspectives from Forrest, Dana, and Mary. I'd like to give our business representatives, and I think Kristen kind of got into this a little bit earlier, about how some of these side effects from this trauma, from these substance use disorder and challenges of mental health are affecting the business community. Doug, do you have anything to add to that? And how is this impacting you as a business?
Yeah, it's really opened my eyes. I mean, for one, you almost become numb to it. Again, where my office is located, I could show you videos of things that we've had from cameras around the office that are, you wouldn't even want to read about in the paper. I mean, from when we had the encampment, I think under the Beeline Trail, areas around where my office is, I've got stairs down to basement doors and little fences and nooks and crannies and plants to hide behind, and I was cleaning up, excrement every day because there was no bathroom, there were no facilities there for the encampment. So my first thought was that I knew that we have a mental health and addictive crisis, but I also thought we've got a health crisis here because we've got people in a floodway, which we know there was an issue there, but we've got people using the bathroom wherever they may find. The needles, I know that has come up, and I've got a jar full of needles that I found just this summer. I couldn't have my kids come and mow my yard anymore because I was afraid they would pick up a needle and stick themselves. So I, would do a sweep of the property first before my kids could even mow my own yard to make $20 for, school or something. And I've had, just recently, and I know I texted you about it, there was a broken down van parked on the Circle K lot next to my office, and from my windows, my staff watched two people shooting up right there. And one of them, as soon as he put the needle in, we thought he was dead. He just immediately went out. And I had never seen anything like that before. And what do you do? You know, and I said you become numb because you see so much of it. You know, and I would say, I mean, I don't know about representing the whole business community, but I know a lot of us, when Shalom wanted to open on the weekends, we donated money to help pay for the weekend. And because I saw what this stuff doesn't just stop on the weekends. But then what it did for me as a business, what backfired for me was suddenly I'm not at my office on weekends and there were people there, and because now there were services for them close by. And so, you know, you try to do things and you hit and miss sometimes. We called the police on the people next to us, hoping they would come, and there were some, at least we knew there were some drugs there that they could get off the street and help someone that we thought might be dead. And there was just an article in the paper a week before about a young lady found in a tent that had overdosed. So it was really on our minds. And when the police came, they talked to the driver while the lady sitting on the ground, a young lady with these older gentlemen, was still shooting up. And then when she saw it was a policeman, and you could tell her action, she was definitely high. They walked around, talked to him, gave her the thumbs up, and then walked away and left. And we were just dumbfounded because as soon as they left, she shot up again. And the gentleman kind of woke up, so at least we were glad that he was with us still. But how do you solve that? You know, how do you, I've spoken to this before. You know, I have a rental right behind my office, and people that rent from it on a year-to-year basis, and it was an affordable rental. But people that lived there for a year saw too much. And so we turned it into an Airbnb because it's a little more short-term, and you just hope that nothing happens while somebody is there. And it's been pretty good, but we had one lady a couple of months ago who left us a message, and she was visiting town with her daughter who's looking at IU as a college, you know, choice. And she left me a private note and said, we went to the McDonald's down the street and there was somebody that they were rescuing from an overdose right in front of our eyes. And then we had a fire down the street of a building that was boarded up. And you know, she just said, we're really from a small town out of state, and this was more than we've ever seen. Yeah. So it impacts, I think, people that are visiting town as well. And I don't know of an easy solution, but it certainly is something that we deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so, you know, I think that, you know, syringes are probably one of the most symbolic images that we have of this crisis that we're dealing with in the community. We've got a syringe program here that's administered through Monroe County government. A lot of times I hear from our members, they say, well, why is Beacon handing out all of these needles to people? And that's not the case at all. They're not the ones administering a syringe program. And so I think it's important that we clear up some of the misperceptions surrounding the prevalence of syringes that we're seeing in the community. But again, I think this is very indicative. We know the data has suggested from Monroe County Coroner's Office overdoses that are an all-time high in this community. I think at this point already we've had close to 40 in the community this year. There's going to be more. This is reflective of the highly addictive nature of these new designer manufactured drugs like fentanyl and this new brand of meth that was unknown to us just 4 or 5 years ago. So, you know, I would like to just kind of get some perspectives maybe from you all on this syringe services program. Is this, you know, is it working? Are there things that we can do to get a little bit more accountability to this? And what are kind of your general thoughts about how this program is being administered?
So I really wish that somebody was here from Indiana Recovery Alliance because that's the program we're talking about. They have a harm reduction philosophy and believe very strongly in it. And so I don't know that any of us up here can speak with clear authority about the rationale for that program and what has changed. So I just like to put that out there. I will say that if we're looking at solutions, we talk about the prevalence of needles. One is to, include IRA in this discussion, but I think also, what can we do? We often feel powerless. I was talking to a resident of Crawford recently who goes out every day with her bucket and collects needles and brings them back. And so, there are things that we can do as individuals or as groups to do cleanup. Doug mentioned the defecation and urination. There are no real public bathrooms. We had some at the 4th Street parking garage that I believe is now closed. I'm not sure if anybody from the city can speak to that. Same with Trades District. So if the problem is defecation and urination because we don't have facilities, how can we get more facilities? So I think that casting it as like, all right, here's the problem. Are there solutions that we can at least move towards would be really helpful.
Yeah, so we do the same thing that some of, like Doug has talked about. We're daily clean. I have crews that go around daily to our properties cleaning up needles. And more importantly, we have a good neighbor policy where we go up and clean needles up from our neighbors' properties. We do not condone drug use on our site, so you're not permitted to use drugs on our site. So they will ditch their needles and things before they come on property, which causes some woes for our neighbors. But that is something that we have seen increasing, and as you have seen increasing, and Forrest and I have both talked about the methamphetamine addiction, and we've just seen that increasing. And I think one of the points here, and I was reading a little bit about this last night, the needle exchange, right? So from what I have seen, we're not seeing the exchange piece here, amongst those. And I can't speak for our IRA and their administration of that, but we don't see the exchange piece taking place, right? And what we would love to see is, of course, the addictions being addressed, those with substance use disorders being addressed. We'd love to see that. But we all know that there's a season in a person's life when they're ready for that, right? And so that takes coming alongside and partnering with them until they're ready for that. And that takes sometimes a tremendous amount of manpower, which also runs into funding, which is case managers for us, right? So we deal with the same thing you're dealing with daily. We try to work with it in our community, and that's kind of where we're at as well.
Yeah, all good things that have been said, and I do kind of agree solidly with what Mary said, which is we're homeless and housing providers. So homeless service and housing, we're not. This is not our specialty in terms of our work, but we certainly intersect with it, of course. And so there's things I know about it that I feel like are important to say, even though I feel hesitant to talk about it because I'm not the expert on it. But a couple of things that I think are of value when we think about it is the reason that these exist primarily is to prevent HIV and Hep C, the spread of Hep C and HIV, so we don't have something like what happened in Scott County some years ago where they had that massive outbreak of HIV there, and so that's the core reason why our community has chosen to through the health department in connection with the state, chosen at this time to have a syringe access program, and I find some comfort in this, and I don't know if this is helpful but it is my understanding that there has never been a case of someone getting Hep C or HIV through a found needle, a community found needle. So they're scary, but they're not nearly as dangerous as we think they might be. And so I find that a little bit relieving when I think about it. But I think those are all things we need to weigh as we think about needles, because they are there's a lot of pros and cons to them, and so as a community, I think that's worthy of discussion, right? And to figure out what's we're weighing some things against other things, and what's the right weight. And truthfully, I don't know. And I will add that the level of overdose we're seeing, in theory, the data says that syringe access programs don't increase use. And I have no reason to doubt that, other than to say that we have a serious problem in our community, and I think that's more coincidental than causative. But we are in this situation now where it is dying from an overdose. Something we need to do more work on, as opposed to Hep C and HIV, right? Are they in contradiction? I don't know. So these are some of the things that swirl through my brain as I think through these programs and what to do.
That's very good insight. Thank you. And I think clearly we've identified already that one of the main points of failure in the community is just access to treatment, access to care. And I'm curious from both the service provider standpoint and from our business and the audience as well too. If you have questions, please feel free to let us know and we can raise some of those. But what can we do to address some of those points of failure? What are solutions that come to mind with you all who are working in the trenches?
Are you talking specifically about substance use?
Yeah, substance use, mental health treatment.
Yeah, I will say that deinstitutionalization was a big mistake. We should have attempted to fix the hospitals to make them better rather than completely eliminating them. That was a nice idea that went horribly wrong, and so we do. I think that's a country-related issue that we definitely need to rethink, and I hope that we do. Right now, California just did something recently with conservatorships where they changed the definition of grave danger under their law. I'm not as familiar with Indiana's laws around this and all the definitions, but that allowed for people. It added that people who are having trouble caring for themselves with basic needs, that the food, shelter, just kind of staying alive, that can be considered a form of harm to themselves, that the state can step in, and that's not something that exists in most of the country right now. So that's an interesting thing that someone can, if you will, and this is a complicated word, I don't like it, but choose to be homeless when you're severely mentally ill. Where's the choice there, and the challenge of that? That's a big question. And I'll also say that, I do think that we have a breakdown right now in how we do criminal justice, and that we have two solutions mostly through our criminal justice system. There are positives on the edges of that, but one is arrest people and lock them up, and the other is release them. And we need more functional, effective solutions within the criminal justice system. Because my opinion is that most of the folks that are causing the significant challenges to us as a community and are breaking laws, we talked about a code of conduct. We have a code of conduct. It's the law. And the folks that are breaking those laws are not people that are necessarily stopped by access or lack of access to resources. They're stopped by other factors that we could get into, but it's not something that choice necessarily is the thing that's going to get them the care they need. So that's very complicated and risky, but I do think that's a breakdown right now in our systems, in our country, and how we do things. And we don't have places to bring people to help them get better when they're in situations of constantly creating, crimes that impact our community. And so, how do we do better with that pathway for people?
I think we need more resources. at the state and local level, and we need better alignment of those resources for our community priorities. I think that's where the business community can be really instrumental, particularly at the state level. Businesses have a voice that can be used to advocate for more funding for substance use recovery and mental health. I feel like we also need to hold our mental health service providers accountable. In this area, it's Centerstone, and when things are funded, we need to make sure that the outcomes are what we desire. And then I think generally at the local level, a better alignment of funders to community priorities. And for me, I see that as housing, mental health, and substance use. So by alignment, I mean there are funding mechanisms through the county, through the city. I see the Health Foundation, Bloomington Health Foundation here, the Community Foundation, and others. So your voice in communicating that to those funders is very powerful, and I think much needed to get us where we need to be.
And I appreciate what Mary just said, and we absolutely need more resources coming from the state and even, I think, from the federal level as well, too, to make a serious impact on this. One of the things that kind of complicates our criminal justice situation here locally and in all counties in Indiana is that once somebody is in the custody of the jail, Monroe County government then becomes responsible for that person's health care. And if you look at, and I was, as a former county council person, I would look at budgets, and there was one particular line item in the jail budget that continues to skyrocket, go up and up and up, and that is for healthcare costs. I don't know how expensive it is to care for somebody who is suffering from extreme addiction or extreme mental health disorders, but I'm sure it's very expensive. And that just kind of, I think, underscores the need for more resources at the local level to get people the real help they need. It's not going to help them to just sit in a jail cell. They've got to get treatment options, and that's an expensive thing to do.
Can I respond to that really quick?
Sure.
About, like, what they can do right now to make a difference. We're talking about a lot of people that are in just a temporary crisis. They might need a job, right? Is that something that our employers here in the chamber could do? How many people just need employment, need a steady employment, need insurance, need a place that they can put down as their employer so that they can get a rent on an apartment? Like, that is one of the number one things you can do as a chamber member, is to reach out to these guys and find out, how can I get connected to help support people with employment? I need to hire people, I need to train people. I think that's one of the number one things that you could do easily, is find a way to employ somebody.
Can I add to that too, Kristen? One of the, I'm going to shout out Cook here this morning. Cook did a wonderful job of bringing in Goodwill, and they started a program, was it New Beginnings? It was the, not the Excel, but the plant. Yeah, the plant on the south side of town, yeah. And where they employed folks that, second chance employers. So they would bring them in knowing they had addictions, knowing they were struggling with some mental illness issues, but they came alongside of them and knowingly employed them and came alongside them on twofold. One, they provided them employment, paid them a wage, and then also had another branch where they cared for them, helped them, walk them through treatment issues, and gave them leeway to do that. And so I thought that was a phenomenal program. And I'd love to see the business community get behind more of those, because that is just, I saw a lot of change in that. Also, they offered first month's rent for their employees and helping them on forward in that. And that produces hope in a person. And I saw several good results from that, and people who were working through their addiction and able to strive and have the assistance and resourcing needed to work through that. So I was really encouraged. So those kind of programs I see nationwide, but they can be expensive. Because we're dealing with people and long-term many times, and sometimes they don't show up to work, and so which hurts productivity. So you have those issues too you have to look at. But we need to invest in people in that way. And to Kristen's point, I don't think it's just funding just to fund. I think it's funding with a goal, right? Of seeing lives improved and seeing people be able to become citizens working and being in our community and having hope and respect. And I think there's a big piece that we really need to address in our community. And I think that was a great piece right there that Cook had done. And I just would want to advocate for more of those opportunities.
And what's more expensive, investing in something like that to hopefully make change, or losing the business from people that won't even walk in your door because of this continued growth of problem? So, I think that's what we need to look at. Yeah, it might be expensive in one way, but what's more expensive in the long run? It's literally killing our community.
Good point. I want to get to a couple of questions here from the audience. One related to Stride Center. Could you please talk about the Stride Center, its impact, and if we have enough mental health and substance abuse treatment providers here locally to make a difference?
Dana?
Could you phrase that question again?
Yeah. Could you talk about the Stride Center, its impact, and if we have enough mental health and substance abuse treatment providers here locally?
Thank you, Mary. The Stride Center. I was excited to see the Stride Center come to town and to start offering services, a 23-hour day room where services to be afforded, and I'd love to have someone here speak about that. But I was excited to see that happening. And so I thought, wow, this will be a way for those folks that we're dealing with experiencing crises to receive the help they need and get plugged into a system. Unfortunately, it didn't quite manifest that way. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I just know the responses that I've seen from our guests and those that we've been sheltering. It's a phenomenal idea. Of course, a diversion to divert people from jail to care. That's what we want, and I think that's where the Stride Center's goal is and still is. But that emergent piece that we had, for example, in the early stages of Stride, they wouldn't accept people with who are violent in nature. Someone experiencing a psychosis can very well be violent in nature, and our staff found ourselves being that place to de-escalate situations like that. I think I want to shout out my staff. I got some of them here today who do a phenomenal job of de-escalation at our site and caring for those struggling with those issues. But I would like to see a greater partnership with Stride, and I would love to see them getting really more closely tied to service providers, especially emergent service providers. Because I think we could preempt some of the things that we're struggling with today. You want to address that?
I will. I mean, just the numbers are just not enough at Stride. They're not really serving enough people that need them, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think the biggest challenge in terms of real diversion is that a 23-hour kind of program is not what we need. We need more extensive inpatient care. And that is particularly important when so much of the trends of healthcare is outpatient, that for people without homes, outpatient is a terrible, terrible idea. It just doesn't work for them. And so we need to create some inpatient opportunities.
So are you talking about like a detox center or something similar?
There's anecdotal evidence now, some little preliminary evidence that it can take as long as a year to get fully, to have your brain recover from prolonged meth use, sobriety. So we're talking really significant care, and that's a little daunting, but. That's some of what we're seeing, that kind of inpatient care needs to be extensive. And there might be different variations where you have transitional processes for people coming back. And there are other communities in the world who have done interesting strategies around that and have been successful. but it will take a significant revision of how we treat criminal justice and deal with criminal justice in our community and deal with those issues in connection with the criminal justice system.
Let me address one more thing there. At Wheeler, 130 years. We're 130 years old this week, so we've been around for a minute. But one of the things we focus on is life transformation and coming alongside people for the long term. We want part of what we do is emergency sheltering services, but another part is our long-term programming. We have a program at Camp Hunt, which is out on Fish Road, northern Monroe County here, that we offer addiction recovery, Christian-based addiction recovery, that is 8 months in duration. We have found, as Forrest said, that's what time it takes. We're looking at long-term engagement with people and coming alongside them for the care that is needed. Fortunately, we can do that fairly, it's not inexpensive. We have a lot of funders come behind us to help us with that, but it is something that we engage in. Now, here locally in town, we have a program we call Foundations to help come alongside people that are not yet ready to enter treatment, who still want to come alongside and do something to improve their lives. And so we offer that simply because there's nowhere else for them to go. And so we bring them in and we equip them and prepare them for when they are able to get into that place of housing, security, or maybe they're ready for treatment. And so that's kind of what we do. So we do two things twofold there.
Okay, next. How can the average citizen with no specialized training or expertise insert themselves as part of the solution, whether it's one afternoon or one afternoon per week? Any thoughts on that?
All of the agencies have volunteer programs that I'm aware of. And one of the things that Heading Home has started to do is to have a volunteer an advocacy newsletter that goes out once a month that lists these opportunities. I'd be happy to sign you up to get our newsletters. But that's something that the programs are, and I know Beacon and Wheeler both have programs for volunteers. You can do it one-off, you can do it over time. Middle Way House too. I see Maria Douglas out there. So that's one way. I think that several of us have talked about the need for walking beside people as they come out of this really dark place. I think that we need, as a community, to find more ways for people to provide a network for those who don't have a network of support. For the immigrant population, I know Exodus has a program where you have a core group of people from the community that are just the support network for individuals and families who come here from other countries and sometimes they just need, like, how do you turn on your utilities? My car broke down, what do I do? Any number of things. So I feel like there's an opportunity for us as a community to figure out a way to tap folks who don't necessarily have specialized expertise except for their lives, right? All of us have people that we've turned to in our life when maybe we need a little money, maybe we need just some help with navigating the world that we're living in. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that for those who are struggling in our community too.
Can I interject one thing in it? The theme keeps going around, coming alongside, right? And there was and I can't remember, I should have looked him up. There was a rescue mission CEO out west, and I think it was Portland, who said one of the major causes of homelessness, we look at homelessness, cause of homelessness, substance use disorders, mental health, all these things. But he said one of the major causes of homelessness in our nation is not all those things. It's the lack of healthy relationships. Let that sink in for a minute. And so that falls back on whom? That person you just asked. How can I give an afternoon, right? How can I come alongside and mentor somebody for a day? And that's exactly what it takes, a healthy relationship. And I don't want to speak for Forrest, but I know we're all begging for volunteers. Please come. And please. And we can engage you, educate you, and engage you to be a mentor, to come alongside someone and help them and be that healthy relationship they need.
I just wanted to, can I add something real quick?
I wanted to get this in when we were talking about employment earlier, but one area that I would love to have some support with and to build, I'd like to build a little advisory team to get together to discuss employment, specifically around how Beacon could be more impactful around that. And in particular, what I'm interested in and focusing on is, Kristen earlier talked about, you as business owners hiring people. We want to be what to some degree I'd like to do is create a program where we can properly vet someone so that you can hire somebody so that you can feel some confidence in the person you're hiring is likely to be, to do well with you, and then to have a relationship with our organization, so that as that person is working for you, there's a relationship that carries over. And so, if anyone it feels like, oh, that's really right up my alley, I'd love to talk to you either today or in the near future to kind of create something like that, because I think that's really, really valuable and really important, and something that I feel like is a next step for our work in our community.
Great. And just one, I know we're running short on time here, one quick question that I think can probably be answered pretty quickly is, do we have enough shelter beds for those living on our streets? Is there an estimate of the gap if not?
Okay, so that's something we get questions about all the time. Is there enough beds available for people? Every winter season we come along, is there enough beds for people? Currently, we opened a new emergency shelter services building last November. And some of you guys were at the grand opening in February. But that building has 84 beds, 10 overflow mats, and then we can put 10 overflow mats in our other existing building at the Center for Men. So altogether, 104 beds we have available for anyone experiencing homelessness tonight. So we have yet to fill all those. Even last year, the year before last, one of the things I think you're going to hear from us all the time is homelessness has been remaining pretty static. In other words, we're not seeing big spikes, increases in homelessness. So I'm confident that we'll probably have enough bed space running into the winter season. However, do you know that? And do those experiencing homeless know that? Thank you for the question. So we do have the bed space ability. We do more than likely we'll have that covered. And that's not even including the beds at Friends Place. And that's not including our program beds of 32. I think Forrest has about 40 plus beds at the Friends Place, and then we have an additional 32 beds in our programming area. So altogether, 440 beds are available at our site. So for men, and so I do not think it's going to be a bed issue. I think it's an awareness issue, a promotion issue on our part to make sure that awareness is out there and we're promoting it.
I think.
Well, so the interesting thing is, if we become the homeless shelter for Indiana, then yeah, there's not enough shelter beds. But that's not, I don't think, what we're here to do or here to be. And in our system, the bottleneck is housing. And so the place where people get stopped is not the moving into shelter; it's the moving out of shelter. And that's the challenge we see. And the work forward in front of us. And that's why, honestly, we've invested so heavily in housing, both for people with severe issues that we've been talking about, as well as people like working families and who are just struggling to make ends meet. So if we're talking about just the core of the issue, it's really that bottleneck is that shelter. It's not homelessness to shelter, it's shelter to housing. And that's where we really need to tackle the problem.
Let me tag one thing onto that, is that, yes, we need housing, but not only does Monroe County need housing, Greene County needs housing, Lawrence County needs housing, Brown County needs housing. It's a regional issue, and that's why we're seeing some of the bleed over here. It is a regional issue. We are surrounded by rural poverty, and they struggle with housing. And so we have to, if you have, as businesses and you're networking with other communities, other counties, that is something we need to look at as well. How do we initiate housing opportunities in these other counties? Not just our own, not just how much space do we have in Bloomington to build? And that's the question needs to really be looked. That's some of the strategy needs to be looked at. How do we look at the other counties and assist? How do we come alongside? How do we partner with them? How do we make permanent supportive housing units available for them? How do we make rapid rehousing funds available for them? How do we help them achieve affordable housing? That's something I think we really need to look at on a regional basis.
I want to add one thing about the shelters. There are beds. There are reasons why people don't want to go to shelters. Pets, for example. So if you don't want to be separated for your pets, I don't think you accept pets now. You do? Never mind, for Wheeler, they accept pets. Being separated from a partner, for example. So there are reasons why people might not want to go to shelter, even if there are beds there. I just also want to circle back to the employment question. I would ask everybody to think very seriously about your hiring practice related to ex-felons. I see Linda Brady here from Monroe County Probation. We say that you serve your time and you've done your time, but that carries over for not only employment, but also for housing. More and more landlords are doing background checks that eliminate people with any kind of criminal record. So anytime you can have that flexibility to give somebody a chance, that's so important, because otherwise you'll slide back into your old habits and won't be able to be a contributing member of society.
These are all great points, and we're at time, so I just want to give our panelists a big round of applause for the excellent discussion. I learned a lot today. I hope you all did as well, too. We're going to continue to have these conversations and build strategies going forward. Thanks for joining us today. Chris is going to give us just a couple of really brief closing announcements.
Thank you again. Thank you, Eric, for moderating. Thank you to the panelists, Doug Bruce, Reverend Forrest Gilmore, Dana Jones, Mary Morgan, Christian Weida. Your remarks are very helpful, and hopefully the conversation continues. This is just a start. Appreciation to our sponsors again. Let's give everybody a quick round of applause. And let's bring up from the Monroe County History Center, Daniel, you're right here. Pronounce your last name again for me. Shalego. Would you want to give a couple words? You want to give the mic here?
I think I'm loud enough. I want to say thank you to everyone for coming out. We really do appreciate it. I heard a lot of people asking about what we have here. So I just want to let you know very quickly, we do have several exhibits in this room, including the one on the far wall opposite me about the renaming of Baker and Eagleston Avenues. It just goes into a lot more detail behind it. It just went up last week. And behind me is the National Organization for Women in our community case. So they do a lot of great work as well. And then upstairs we have a huge exhibit on print media that we've been getting a lot of attention for. So please make sure to come back. Everything is on upstairs. I know parking meters are an issue, but if you do have a few minutes, feel free to pop your nose upstairs, look around, kind of get a feel. And then also, we have two big events coming up. One is our big garage sale in November. I have a whole bunch of flyers, so if you can't find it there, you didn't look hard enough. But that really helps to support us. And then we're also partnered with Resilience Productions. And their latest production will be the 27th, 8th, and 9th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right here in this room, in a very similar setup to where you're seated right now. So thank you for coming out. Thank you to the Chamber for coming and all of our panelists. That was fantastic. So
thank you for hosting us today, Daniel. Hey, food. Chef Lee made a wonderful spread. Please consider taking some with you right now. It still eats just as good as it did when you walked in, so we want to see some of that food taken. Hey, just a quick couple chamber announcements. We have a lot of upcoming events. It wouldn't be a chamber without more events coming up. For all these events, make sure you register at chamberbloomington.org or by scanning the QR code on the table signs or using your chamber app. We have our Tired Genie ribbon cutting. It's a grand opening on October 27th. That's from 11 to 1 p.m. Please join us in celebrating the bright future they hold. There will be a ribbon cutting ceremony at noon, and you won't want to miss the amazing prizes and giveaways. Finally, on Thursday, November 9th, our annual FutureCast event, you might have known this as Business Outlook, very popular with our members, will be taking place at the Monroe County Convention Center from 11:15 to 1 o'clock. That is November 9th. It's a Thursday. Make sure you sign up on all these events at our website, chamberofbloomington.org, QR codes, and our chamber app. Also, we will be looking for our health and business registration is going to open very soon, like this week, so check your email for that. Thank everyone who joined us today. I want to value your support in Chambers. We work to build a better business and a better community. Have a wonderful rest of the day and keep those conversations going.